Pokemon is a wonderful game full of wonderful creatures and powerful monsters and exciting battles. We're going to be doing none of that. Today, we beat Pokemon Sword without attacking. This originally started with a pre-built team of 6 Pokemon that were designed to make the game as playable as possible. Well, I then had a thought. What if this was entirely possible vanilla? No modded saves, no traded Pokemon, nothing. Just vanilla. So, this also begs the question, why? Well, good question. Here's how it went. I named myself Noxia because we're going to be an incredibly toxic person in this run, and got myself a Sobble. Now, the starter choice is very important here. Giving Hop Grookey means that we are unable to use Poison Powder in the opening fights, making the initial battles incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Now, picking Sobble also gives Leon the strongest team, while giving Hop Scorbunny. While Scorbunny is going to prove a bit of an early game menace, this is their best chance of success. The first battle of the run is Hop. This battle begins with our Sobble, named Internal Screaming, who has a crippling fear of violence, facing up against Hop's Wooloo. This fight is 2 minutes of pain. Why 2 minutes of pain? Well, the only move that's legal for us to use here is Growl, and this means Wooloo has to hit us a minimum of 16 times, unless we get lucky and get a crit, for this battle to end. This takes forever, but after 2 minutes of waiting and mashing the button, thanks to a high roll crit from the Wooloo, we're finally free of the intro. The stupid sheep is gone, and we're free. There are 2 major saving graces in this run. First, you don't actually have to beat the initial Hop battle, you can simply lose and move on, at which point you are thrust directly into the Slumbering Wild. We still can't use attacks or anything like that during this section, so we just run away and move on. The second saving grace is Caterpie. Yes, Caterpie, well, more specifically, Butterfree. This is one of the coolest parts of the run because the 15% encounter is how we are going to beat the run, and one of our major tools up into the mid-game, and one of the most important Pokemon we'll see in this entire playthrough. We got extremely lucky here and got a 15% encounter very early on, allowing us to catch Caterpie and name it Poggies. We now had our first team member and important piece of the puzzle. This meant we could send Sobble off to a Pokemon farm where he can live the rest of his life, chilling and never having to fight again. Godspeed, friend. Now that we had a Pokemon, we could move a little bit further on and grab the 20 free Pokeballs from Leon and save a tremendous amount of time to level up Caterpie. Why do we have to level up Caterpie? Well, Caterpie doesn't learn Poison Powder until it evolves. This meant catching Pokemon in the same patch of grass for well over 40 minutes. The trainers here are all pretty standard. Use Poison Powder, spam Harden, and heal when you have to. Hop will prove a bit more of a concern, because we gave Hop Scorbunny, which gives Leon the strongest team, but also prevents Hop from having Grookey, which is immune to Poison Powder, as this is a big deal, but Scorbunny is thankfully fairly weak this early on, and Butterfree's defenses are more than enough to get us moving. After almost an hour and a half, more than 10 minutes of which was Hop's second fight, it was over. A simple stall battle and nothing else. The rest of the path into the mines isn't a big deal. However, our encounters in the wild area will prove quite useful later on. One of these Pokemon was just supposed to be a mascot. So much so that I didn't nickname her. But her moment of glory was upon her, and none of us knew it. The most annoying, frustrating, and downright disrespectful character in the entirety of the series was about to be before us. I had no idea this would be one of the hardest fights in the entire run, and I would come dangerously close to wiping multiple times in this one fight. This fight should, on paper, have been cake. We already had burns and poison and curse. What could go wrong? Well, a lot. I led with Golett and tried to use Curse, which cut Golett's HP and did nothing to Solosis. Nothing. I did not realize at the time that Solosis had Magic Guard. This meant none of our status moves affected it. After frantically cycling through my Pokemon, I came up with a plan. Remember that mascot I mentioned? Well, she was about to come in clutch and earn herself the proud spot of MVP. She knew Spite. Spite is a move which drops the enemy's power points, ultimately stopping them from attacking. If this ever hits 0, the Pokemon will be forced to use Struggle, a typeless damage move, dealing damage to the user. After more than 10 minutes of this strategy, Beat would eventually fall, leaving us with Milo. Milo was positively cake. A simple burn and phasing strat was all Milo could handle. Milo did power through our confusion a few times, however, our tanks were more than able to keep him at bay and leave the fight as a pretty simple showing of stall. Our next few fights in Hop and Team Yell were honestly a breeze. I fail to understand how any of the locals couldn't defeat them without me and my 6 pacifist friends, but this is Pokemon where logic is about as likely as wearing underpants for a hat. The citizens' failures notwithstanding, we now had to handle Nessa. Nessa's fight wasn't particularly difficult, but it was interesting and one of the first examples of phasing in the run. We'll talk more about that in a second. After leading Tentacruel and setting up spikes, we now had a clean opportunity for Poggies to use one of her best skills, Whirlwind. This allowed us to phase in Dreadnought on our own terms and force it to take toxic damage from square one. Poggies was outsped by Dreadnought and blasted by a Max Darkness, at which point I put our new Blissey in place and went for a Max Guard. The rest of Nessa's fight was largely irrelevant as we were able to leave her hopeless, leaving nothing but the next bead fight in our way before Kabu. Now, before bead 2, we needed a Stealth Rock user. I went ahead and caught one, which would ultimately become a Gigalith, Boldor, or one of the main components of our team and a soon-to-be star player. The next bead fight would go largely the same, barring Pastel Veil and his Ponyta being an annoying, but small inconvenience. Easy, but annoying. At this point, our team is starting to get quite a few tools under its belt. We're able to deal big damage with Toxic and Curse, phase and use Stealth Rock damage, as well as put down burns and other such status effects to make passive damage even more intense. Combine that with our access to Curse, and Marnie was an incredibly easy fight. There's not much to say here aside from putting the right tank in front of the right attack, but this is all basic Pokemon stuff, aside from our use of healing items. At this point in the run, we're starting to take enough damage that we do have to heal for long drawn-out battles, and that'll be our policy going forward. Marnie, despite not being hard, took a whopping 12 minutes to bring down. However, the next fight in line, Kabu, is always a problem. It doesn't matter if your team is purpose-built to thrash him, Kabu always proves a challenge. He is the first fight we've ever scripted. I lead Tentacruel and go for Toxic Spikes. Kabu misses a Will-O-Wisp, allowing me to pivot into Ninetales and catch the next Will-O-Wisp. I know Kabu won't go for another fire attack here because Ninetales is also fire type, so I switch in Boldor to catch the next attack, which is Quick Attack. I make a small misplay here where I Iron Defense instead of Stealth Rocks, but we do get those up eventually. Spikes also come down for more entry damage. Stealth Rocks are a pivotal part of the plan here. We can catch an Ember with our Ninetales and are poised to sweep. Confuse Ray buys us some time, and from here the fight is normal, toxic, and phasing. Poggies tanks an Ember and Whirlwinds to force them to Scorch in. This is perfect, because all of the hazards, spikes, stealth rocks, and toxic spikes chunk Centiskorch for more than 3/4 of its HP and leave Kabu crippled. His damage can't be ignored, but it's entirely physical. Blissey effortlessly Dynamaxes and tanks his remaining damage, giving us a clean W over one of the most frightening gym leaders in Gen 8. For once, a plan worked, which, in retrospect, should have been a giant red flag. Unfortunately, up until the B gym, not a whole lot happens aside from getting a Frostlass. Our team is moving at a pretty strong clip at this point, and I'm starting to get a little overconfident. So, we decided to use Hitmontop as setup fodder. Tentacool, Gigalith, and Frostlass are all incredibly important here for setting up entry hazards. It is critical to get all 3 layers of spikes, a layer of toxic spikes, and stealth rocks down, because we are relying entirely on damage over time and entry damage. Poggies comes out, and the phasing war begins. I got lucky here, and Sirfetch'd comes out, and then Hitmontop, and no Machamp. This is letting us shred her entire team before the big man himself comes out. Rarely does phasing go so well. Machamp may look like a rejected Ninja Turtle, but he hits like a runaway freight train, and this is still dicey. I get incredibly unlucky as he goes for max darkness. This is bad. The new Dusclops we just gotten and switched in is dead, and we are down 2 levels. Hail comes up at the cost of Rennie's life, and Machamp is now taking passive damage. Unsung played the hero here, allowing us to stall Machamp down to 1 turn. Despite perfect phases, this fight was scary, and genuinely reminded me that Bee's powerhouse, especially with Pangoro still in her backline, and Hirtan, our Dusclops, isn't going to enjoy tanking Night Slashes. No one from our team can feasibly take that many hits from it. It's up to Potion stalling and hoping for no Night Slash crits, or this entire thing could go up in smoke. Thankfully, only 1 crit happens, and we survive. In the business, we call those a wake-up call. Our team had options, we had to play this carefully, or everything was bound to go to shit. Up next was our eternal nemesis B. While our team is quite a lot more powerful, he still has a lot of things that handle stall. This was going to be another long fight. While nowhere near as difficult as his previous iterations, the same problems presented themselves. Pastel Veil, Magic Guard, and a lot of psychic damage. Opal, however, well, Opal was the easiest gym so far. The Violite on our Dusclops Hirtan meant that he was hilariously tanky, and the combination of hazards and curse meant she was a bit of a joke. Which is a shame for all of us fairy fans out there. Next up was Gordy. Not hard, but it was immensely satisfying to shred one of the more dangerous trainers in all of my Nuzlockes, like stealing candy from a baby. Gordy eating Crow is supremely satisfying, and using his Shuckle as setup fodder, even more so. I laughed as his entire team died a slow and painful death, especially after Bloom used Stockpile to set up hilarious defenses and passed it to a Violite Dusclops, only to watch the world burn. Dusclops, for the record, took 18 damage from Colossal's Max Flare in the sun. I've never been more proud, that is, until Dusclops hit the double protect, rendering Gordy useless. After watching the most toxic and vicious performance of my entire career, Hop thought it was a good idea to start something. But really, he just needs to stop. I feel bad for him, and it goes about as well as you'd expect. Marnie and Team Skull stood about the same chance, but the next fight is one of my favorites. Piers. Piers is a really interesting fight in Sword and Shield, especially casually, and the banger of a theme always makes this fight a ton of fun to play through. His Scrafty, thankfully, is Intimidate and not Shed Skin, which is a massive boon considering I forgot to heal. Going into the fight wounded was a massive mistake. Toxic Spikes don't get up early, and I'm now frantically trying to resurrect my Roserade, Foxia. Scrafty is punching holes in the team, and I need to get my defenses up. Thankfully, Unsung as a unit and able to get +4 Iron Defense up and handle Scrafty's pressure. This would let us set up hazards. We swap the Dusclops and start the Curse Burn. While Hirtan does go down to set up the Curse, this allowed us to put Scrafty and Malamar on a timer. Piers continues to hammer holes in the team, and at this point I'm starting to sweat. His lack of voice acting is not holding him back anymore. Unsung, once again, ever the hero, weathers Obstagoon's assault, and combines his own sand chip damage plus Toxic to put down this monster. Raihan, however, was not particularly difficult. The strategy was interesting. Toxic, burn, switch. But he was not hard. This left us with nothing but Victory Road and the Championship Gauntlet. I like the attempt at something new here. It's not my favorite, but I can see what they were going for. It's long and drawn out, which is a bit of a plus, but none of the fights here are notable, even Hop. Hop does put up some fight, but it's all the same strats you've seen repeated. Marco Cosmos was again much of the same. At this point, Curse is our main DPS tool because they're all immune to poison. However, we have one new toy in the toolbox, a Perish Song Gengar I have fondly dubbed Improvised Spooky Device, or ISD for short. Olenea might have been scary, but again, we have so much status burn at this point that she's not really a threat. Beat, however, was a fight worth exploring. His Mawile is free setup, and then we can just turn and burn his entire team, leaving him in shreds. Being able to shred a previously undamageable opponent was so satisfying. We powered through the refights and emerged into Chairman Rose. Chairman Rose, in theory, can be a difficult fight. His team has a lot of heavy hitters and some genuinely powerful Pokemon. Escavalier is unironically frightening, but Gengar knows Perish Song and lives on 2 HP to get the Perish Song out. A clean switch to Cloyster is our only way of making sure we don't lose that tempo. Iron Defense lets us set up hazards and force momentum into our favor, leaving the rest of this fight to be a simple stall battle. He may be immune to poison, but he can't stop Curse and Burn. Combine that with Cloyster's Shell Armor ability, and this is a breeze. Even Destiny Bond not triggering on Gigantamax Caparaja didn't slow us down at all. This brought us to Eternatus, a fight I was dreading, a fight that can go wrong so fast if he decides to target your team. A fight in which I'm pretty sure 90% of my gimmicks wouldn't work. A fight so frightening that I was genuinely concerned we'd be stuck here for hours at a time. Gengar would easily shred the first phase. Gigantamax Eternatus, though, I was certain. It couldn't be cursed, right? Gengar would still have to be out in front, and I had to make a switch to save it from being... Well, did I? I took a gamble here. Can Gengar curse Eternatus? As the banger kicked into full gear, the gamble worked. This trivialized one of the scariest fights in the run. 1/8 HP every single turn, and free damage. And a fit of giggles I will never forget. I have no idea why this worked. I don't even know how. I just know it worked. Curse worked. If you're ever doing this fight casually or hell in a Nuzlocke, bring Curse. 2 turns, sweet victory. However, victory aside, we had one more challenge. I don't need to tell you, this would be the hardest fight of them all. Leon. Leon's team is a powerhouse, and this specific iteration is his most powerful by a large margin. Every move had to be perfect, and everything had to go according to plan. This was it. I led Hirtan, our faithful Dusclops, and he led Aegislash. I had to win. He used King Shield turn 1, but Will-O-Wisp was a status move, and it hit. I went for Confuse Ray, hoping to slow Aegislash down. While his Shadow Ball did massive damage, Hirtan could take it, the only one that could. Aegislash could easily butter our entire team, and I desperately needed to burn it down fast. A full restore could mean Hirtan stays in the fight unless it was a crit. Eternatus should take a Shadow Ball. I needed to soak a hit to get Stealth Rocks up, but a Sacred Sword would spell certain doom. Anchor, our faithful Cloyster, came out and got obliterated. This was a massive misplay. I could have switched either to Eternatus or Hirtan and stalled it out, but now it was time to think like a Nuzlocker. I sent out Blissey and baited out a Sacred Sword. I then pivoted into the king of the late game, Unsung. Our faithful Gigalith. Stealth Rocks went up on the turn Leon full restored, charging the burn, but allowing us to switch into Blissey to catch his next attack. Thankfully, Leon throws and goes for King Shield here, letting us continue the dance of switches. Aegislash would prove a tough nut to crack, but slowly but surely we were getting our hazards up. Gengar came in and used Destiny Bond. With 1 layer of hazards and a dead Aegislash, we were primed to succeed. Wounded, but primed to succeed. Dragapult would prove a problem, but surely Eternatus would get Toxic down. Right? No. Full paralysis. Dragon's Breath paralyzed and got the proc. An incredible stroke of bad luck. Things were at this point looking dire. Thankfully, a full restore managed to stem the bleeding enough to get Toxic down. This boiled down to us tanking as many hits from Dragapult as possible so we could get those spikes down. Now, Eternatus was crit, but Toxic Spikes made it. Eternatus had done its job. I'd have liked to have gotten more out of him, but Dragapult's offensive pressure was just too much. Especially given Haxorus was out next. I wasn't sure about the range and went for a full restore. Haxorus dealt staggering damage with one outrage. Nothing could take a hit from this thing. Haxorus powered through confusion, nailing high roll after high roll, and I knew Eternatus was going to die. Haxorus was ignoring the confusion chance and fired off 6 consecutive outrages, each nearly one-shotting Eternatus, but eventually Toxic did its job, and he fell. Rhyperior came out, and I was mortally wounded. Our only saving grace was to be hurt by Toxic on the way in. The only play I had was to stack Eternatus and make a clean switch into our faithful Gengar, ISD. ISD, once again, came in the clutch, Destiny bonding and killing Rhyperior, allowing me to pivot to Unsung for the final push. Unsung is a defensive monster, easily able to weather the entirety of Leon's Storm with the help of Eternatus. From here, we still had one more ace up our sleeves, Blissey. Blissey is hilariously tanky especially, and soft-boiled spam is an easy W here, leaving Charizard to die a slow and painful death. In retrospect, I could have played this cleaner, but given my nerves, I'm extremely happy with how this turned out. GG Leon and GG everyone. That is the story of how I beat Pokemon Sword and Shield without attacking. This was, without a doubt, one of the dumbest challenges I have ever done, and some of the most fun I've ever had playing a Pokemon game. Now, if you're watching this right as it goes live at around noon Mountain Time, I'll be doing a Wonderlock right on twitch.tv/DameWellDivine, links down below. As always, I've been your favorite Demon Mom, DameWellDivine, and until next time, I wish you all the best.